I assume you have your program ready to join you on and
Yes.
share your screen if you wish.
Yes.
Great. I'm bringing people into the meeting, on the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
All right, there we go, sharing our screen. Welcome, Dr. Vafa Bayat, and welcome everyone on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We have a very special subject, and this is not a subject that we want you to miss. So thank you for joining us for this special session on what is the proper use for social media.
Yeah,
That is going to be an interesting subject, right?
Yes, it's very interesting.
As soon as we finish bringing people in, we're going to give your formal introduction and then get it on the way.
Okay, perfect. I will give you a couple minutes.
Muchas gracias. All right, there we go. Okay. So I think that we are at 11 a.m. I think it's good for us to start with the introductions right now.
Very good.
So this week's topic, what is the proper use for social media? Anything carried to excess has a pernicious influence upon us. Baha'u'llah also states that various elements of our civilization can prove as much as a source of goodness when kept within the restraints of moderation. It's almost like the virtual world has opened up an array of new opportunities for friendship, teaching, and engaging in elevated conversations. And at the same time, the question is, how can we use it appropriately? Mm-hmm. So this week's presenter, Dr. Vafa Bayat. Dr. Bayat is a research scientist and physician with diverse diagnostic and basic research training from Baylor College of Medicine and Stanford University in neurodegeneration, genetic diseases, and oncology and pathology. Dr. Bayat has a broad range of professional, hands-on experience, including managing complex operations on large research projects, financial strategy, business development, mentoring projects, and, well, so much more. As a postdoc, he proposed and executed multiple projects relating to two diseases of interest to him, pontocerebellar hypoplasia, and I'm going to, I think, spell it out as an acronym, EXO-SC2, EXO-SC2 associated SHRF. In these projects with coworkers, he collaborated with other members of the dermatology and pathology departments and scientists and clinicians in the US and European fields to better understand these diseases using CRISPR, RNA sequencing, and various biochemical techniques in the fruit fly and human cell culture models. He applied and won R21 grant funding and presented our work, I'm retrofitting from his biographical. So presented his work at international conferences. At Stanford, the work won poster prizes in the cancer biology and pathology departments. The work is currently in the submission process, or at this point we finished that, right?
Actually, it's approved. Yeah, sure.
Approved. Beautiful, yeah. Beautiful. So quickly, before we get onto the subject, what happened with that actually?
Oh, it was submitted and accepted, and it's out there. It's out there. But since then, I joined Bitscopic, and which is a healthcare artificial intelligence company, where I'm the head of research and development, and we've been working on predicting COVID-19, which we submitted a paper on last year. We're also looking at drugs which could alleviate the symptoms and reduce mortality using machine learning. And so you'll hear more about that soon.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. So I think, thank you for the introduction. It's a real pleasure to be back. Today I'm going to talk about the use of social media from a Baha'i perspective. This presentation Roxana Danishchu Azizi and I prepared it for our local community, which we've been presenting for the past 3 weeks. And I'm bringing it to you now. So first, we have several questions to consider. Do you use social media? This would include a lot of different things: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google+, Instagram, WeChat, Reddit, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Researchgate, WhatsApp, StockTwits, Yelp, Seeking Alpha, Glassdoor, Flu Trackers, and a lot of others. And for the Baha'i community, it's been using social media since the very beginning, before even Twitter and Facebook. I was just thinking about it and recalling how in the early days of the internet, there was an organization called BCCA, which allowed Baha'is to communicate worldwide on different platforms. So the next question is, do you share your thoughts on social media, only read other people's thoughts, or both? And how do you feel when others like your posts, upvote them, or follow you to see what you're going to say next?
Let me guess, you're a Redditor.
Yeah, I do. I use Reddit as well. How about when they disagree with you, or even attack you or malign you? How do you feel? How do you react? How do you respond? Do you respond to some people, but not to others? Do you use it to stay in touch with others, make new friends, stay informed about what's going on in the world, want to know what other people are thinking about things? Do you use it to affect other people's views? In other words, in the verbiage of the current world, are you an influencer? So what are the top most popular social networking sites? So this is updated in 2018, and the world is changing so fast that this may be outdated now. But Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Qzone, which I don't even know what it is, Weibo, Twitter, Reddit, Pinterest, and so on. These, and check out the numbers at the top of the screen. It's in the millions, and it's in the billions. So on the right is 2,200 million, so 2.2 billion people, and that may be even an undercount. But these are networking sites, but there are also apps. So for example, the whole world has basically switched to WhatsApp, outside the US mostly. But because so much of the world is using it, I use it now just to communicate with my friends in India and other places. Facebook, WhatsApp, Messenger, WeChat. My wife is Chinese. WeChat is a Chinese app, and I use it to communicate with her family and our friends in China and so on. So
What about QQ?
QQ is, I believe, also a Chinese app, but I'm not as familiar with it. Do you have a comment about it?
Oh, well, I mean, QQ did practically everything that Western messenger platforms are doing. I don't know, 5 or 10 years even beforehand.
Right.
They were doing it well before the Western world even got their hands on the earliest versions in Messenger.
Right. Right. And not on here is AOL Instant Messenger. If you remember, that was so popular for many years. So these are popular apps and popular sites. And again, check out the numbers, see how many people use these. And in the past 3 years, I bet these numbers have doubled. So there are also many niche social networks. For example, I show you a screenshot of one that I use called Researchgate. This is used by researchers and they want to follow each other and ask each other questions about papers they've read, papers they're looking at. They ask questions about protocols. They want to gain experience from other researchers, but in a setting outside of other types of social media. Another is stock twits. So this is a place where people discuss stocks, individual stocks. And another one is Nextdoor. You may have heard of this. This one allows people of certain neighborhoods to be able to talk to each other and inquire about whether anybody's seen their missing pet, or whether there's a danger in the area, etc.
Missing Baha'is who move in from up north don't know that they have a community, and then they join.
Yeah. So it's a great way to find out about an area where you just moved into, or also just be helpful. When I log into Nextdoor, I see that there's such a big volunteering spirit in our area, and people are always offering to do groceries for each other and help each other out and be emergency contacts and so on. So I think it's beautiful how each of these different types of social networks and apps allow us to become connected and be helpful in each other's lives, both intellectually and also physically. So as Baha'is, how should we handle social media? I think Roxana and I, when we were discussing how we would address this topic, we decided that the best way to handle it is to apply certain principles, Baha'i principles. So 3 of them are listed here. One is using gentle speech. The second is be vigilant not to hurt anyone. And third, choose words wisely. And I think that if you apply these principles to anything you do, it can only have a positive outcome. So how about the first one? Using gentle speech. And I pulled these quotes from this very nice website called trueselfbaha'i.com. So maybe if John, you could read the first one, and then others can volunteer to read each quote.
It's a great idea. A harsh word is like unto a sword, but gentle speech is like unto milk. The children of the world attain to knowledge and better themselves through this.
And if we could have another volunteer to read the next quote.
Yeah, just feel free to unmute your mic and read the quote. I think Alex is unmuted.
For the tongue is a smoldering fire, and excess speech a deadly poison. Material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. The force of the former lasteth but for a time, whilst the effects of the latter endureth a century.
Great. And another volunteer for the third one? How about I go ahead? A kindly tongue is the lodestone of the hearts of men. And henceforth, everyone should utter that which is meet and seemly, and should refrain from slander, abuse, and whatever causes sadness in men. So, looking at the second quote, the force of the former lasteth but for a time, whilst the effects of the latter endureth a century. Have you noticed in today's time that when somebody tweeted something years ago, 5, 10 years ago, people are able to search for it and find it. And if they said something terrible, expose it and remind people what the person had said. This is, you can see this almost every minute in some news article or something. I think it really demonstrates not only that the statement that they had made can hurt people for years. Even the words themselves are recorded almost permanently, and so never have we seen how true these statements of Baha'u'llah are, and how we should be careful not to hurt anyone, because it's recorded, it's permanently recorded. So we should be very cautious. And looking at the fourth quote, henceforth everyone should utter that which is meet and seemly, and should refrain from slander, abuse, and whatever causeth sadness in men. So just think about how social media, people are often using it to abuse other people. They're criticizing, they're calling each other names. Just take any very popular tweet from somebody and look at the comments underneath it, and you will see a lot of negative statements. This is what Baha'u'llah is warning us not to use. So next we have avoid strife and conflict. So the first quote says, verily I say, strife and dissension, and whatsoever the mind of man abhorreth, are entirely unworthy of his station. In fact, some people, for some, social media is ideal for strife and dissension. You know, they go there for the purpose of fighting and showing that, and dissension basically. And Baha'u'llah is saying that this is not the purpose of communication. The purpose is not to fight. You can explore alternative views of things, and this leads to truth and insight, but it's not a place for fighting. Be not the cause of grief, much less of discord and strife. So you have to really think about what you say, because Baha'u'llah doesn't want you to make people grieved, sad. This is not our purpose. And sometimes this is very hard, especially when you're talking a lot and you're saying a lot of different things. But you have to think about all the people who are reading your message now and potentially in the future. Because like I said, you can write something and it can be read years later by somebody else. You do not want to say something which is hurtful. Strife, antagonism, a spirit of hostility and hatred, is contrary to the good pleasure of God. This is from Abdul Baha. So, antagonism. Can somebody give me a definition of antagonism?
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. Can somebody give me a definition of antagonism?
I define it as the exercise of the ego.
The exercise of the ego. Good, good. And it's a bit more than that. So how does the ego produce antagonism?
anger, resentment, hostility,
Yes, perfect.
and even, as you said, hatred, even as it's stated, hatred, which
Right.
is the extreme.
And Alex's point about ego is critical because a lot of the things we're talking about, this dissension, strife, grief, antagonism, hostility, a lot of it stems from ego. Or at least ego is a component of it. Sometimes people feel very strongly about something, and they say something which is very hurtful to others, and it can be partly caused by self. And so we have to avoid that. Lastly, do not allow difference of opinion or diversity of thought to separate you from your fellow men, or to be the cause of dispute, hatred, and strife in your hearts. So everyone has a different opinion about everything. We all have diverse thoughts, and we should share them. The Baha'i inspired thoughts are very important for the world. We have to share them, but it should not separate us from our fellow men, should not cause dispute, hatred, and strife. It should not cause fighting. It should not cause hate. Our views may be different from other people's, but we shouldn't hate them for their views, right? And they shouldn't hate us. And we should do everything in our power to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? The purpose of the Baha'i faith is to bring about the unity of mankind, not the fighting of mankind. And you can't fight and still seek unity. It has to be, they have to be synonymous. And so going on with that theme, be vigilant not to hurt anyone. Alex, maybe if you could read the first quote again.
Incline your hearts to the counsels given by the most exalted pen, and beware lest your hands or tongues cause harm to anyone among mankind.
Okay, so incline your hearts to the counsels given by the most exalted pen. So this is referring to Baha'u'llah, and it means listen to what Baha'u'llah said, and beware lest your hands or tongues, so hands always represents what you do, and tongues represents what you say. Don't do or say anything that causes harm to anyone among mankind. Okay? Beware lest ye harm any soul or make any heart to sorrow. Lest ye wound any man with your words, be he known to you or a stranger, be he friend or foe. Pray ye for all. Ask ye that all be blessed, all be forgiven. And this really well applies to social media, because it's true that we have a lot of friends in social media who are also reading what we say and looking at our pictures and so on. And remember, in today's world, photographs, they say more than 1,000 words. You've heard that? So what the photos you post are just maybe even more important than the words you say. And today, every photograph is made as a tool to criticize a politician, an actor, a philosophy, an idea, or something else. And they often they convert these photographs into memes, and then they add whatever words they want, and it makes everyone laugh. And these can be very dangerous. They can be very hurtful. So just because it's not a statement on Twitter that I hate X or Y, but instead it's a supposedly funny photograph with a meme in it, doesn't make it independent of what we're talking about. You should be very cautious about using memes because they can be hurtful. So if you ever use them, make sure that they cannot hurt somebody. Okay? Pray ye for all. Ask ye that all be blessed, all be forgiven. And Abdul Baha is the perfect person. He's not just the perfect exemplar in words. He was a perfect example in that he was constantly hurt and attacked by people, but he never responded. He never hurt somebody back. And this is how we should try to be. So, some principles to follow as we use social media. First, as Alex mentioned, step away from ego. Think before you post. You know how wise people like your mother or other people always say that before you say something, chew on it a few times. Say it in your mind. Listen to how it sounds. And think about how others might hear it. Ask yourself why you're posting something. Are you posting something to make people like you? Are you posting something to get attention? Are you posting something to gain followers or to hurt somebody and gain respect somehow? So ask yourself why you're posting. Are you posting to benefit others? To benefit everyone with a view that is uplifting? That's what we should be aiming for. So think about the readers of your post or the viewers of your meme or the link that you posted. Why did you share this link to this news article about something? What did you want people, how did you want people to react? Did you want them to become angry about something? If so, why? Will it be helpful? Will what you said be helpful to others? Will it raise their spirits? Will it make them want to do something useful? Will it be more than just something funny? So will it hurt anyone? Is this the right audience? Is this a group of people who are going to benefit, or maybe it should go somewhere else? And lastly, is it necessary? You know, there's a lot of stuff that you can say, but you have to first ask yourself, do you have to say it? Is it the right time to say it? And is it necessary? So altogether, the key is choose words wisely. Because as Baha'u'llah says, every word is endowed with a spirit. Therefore, the speaker or expounder should carefully deliver his words at the appropriate time and place. For the impression which each word maketh is clearly evident and perceptible. The great being saith, one word may be likened unto fire, another unto light, and the influence which both exert is manifest in the world. So every word you say has an effect on the world that is obvious, evident, and perceptible. So we have to think about that. And one of the things that we are always dealing with in social media, which is just a part of the world's communication, you can think about it like that, is conflict. So when you notice that a stage has been reached when enmity and threats are about to occur, you should immediately postpone discussion of the subject until wrangling, disputations, and loud talk vanish, and a propitious time is at hand. So if there's a fight online, does that mean you jump into it and express your view? Even if your view is, let's be calm or let's be peaceful, don't fight. Is that really the best time to do it? I don't think so. If you see a place where a post and people are commenting and criticizing and fighting each other, stay out. Postpone discussion. Wait till everyone's loud talking, disputes, and wrangling go away. And then when everything is peaceful and quiet, you can step in and say something useful and uplifting and raise the dialogue. Let your thoughts dwell on your own spiritual development and close your eyes to the deficiencies of other souls. Act ye in such wise, showing forth pure and goodly deeds, and modesty and humility, that ye will cause others to be awakened. So, focus on your own soul. You know, as Christ said about throwing stones at others, you know, we should, when you live in a glass house, you don't throw stones. Because when you throw it, it will break your own glass house. Don't focus on the sins of others. Look at your own sins first. Social media is one of those platforms which allows people to criticize everyone. And you can see that on a minute-to-minute basis. And we shouldn't be part of that. We should look at our own selves first, see how we can develop, and not on who has done something wrong. If somebody's done something wrong, it's not for us to decide and to comment on it and to criticize. It's dealt with by the courts, it's dealt with by the police, it's dealt with by legal folk, not the world of social media. Because just remember that when we get involved in these things, it can always be turned on us. So, and you don't want the world of social media to attack you just because you supported the attack of somebody else, for example. It's a two-edged sword. It can come back to haunt you. So avoid it at all costs. So lastly, in terms of the quotes, I wanted to share this quote from a letter from the Universal House of Justice about social media. Especially in the uninhibited realm of social media, wrongs, both real and imagined, are quickly magnified, and a variety of feelings are easily stirred. Righteous indignation, perhaps, or a desire to promote one's point of view, or an eagerness to be seen as the source of new information. You can see all the ego issues involved here. A desire to promote one's point of view, righteous indignation, or an eagerness to be seen as the source of new information. You can see how the Universal House of Justice has its hand on the on the pulse of mankind. Much that is taken to be harmless, or even well-intentioned, is, on closer examination, serving to deepen social divides, fuel differences between opposing groups, and perpetuate disagreements, driving away possibilities for consensus and the search for solutions. If one person's contribution seems provocative or objectionable, reacting to it may have the effect of unwittingly strengthening and increasing the exposure of the original sentiment and exacerbating matters. The followers of the Blessed Beauty must be conscious and conscientious users of any technology they decide to utilize, and must apply insight and spiritual discipline. They should look to the lofty standards of the cause to guide them at all times in the way they express themselves. Baha'u'llah states, every word is endowed with a spirit. Therefore, the speaker or expounder should carefully deliver his words at the appropriate time and place. For the impression which each word maketh is clearly evident and perceptible. The great being saith, one word may be likened unto fire, another unto light, and the influence with which both exert is manifest in the world. And so I think we should remember that not only are the words we say in the social media world permanent and will be recorded forever, even our great-great-great-great-grandchildren will be able to see that we said X, Y, or Z in 2020. It's also written in such a way that even Baha'u'llah can see what we wrote. He is aware of everything, and we want him to also be happy with what we said. And he is aware of all the people that might have been hurt by such and such a thing that we said. So even if we're not, even if we never find out, he knows. So we really want to be careful. And we also want to make sure that we are not the cause of a deepening of social divides. This past 18 months, we've all seen how big these social divides are on the internet. And the fight is just phenomenal out there. We do not want to jump in. We do not want to exacerbate matters. We want to produce unity in the world, and that comes from the heart, the human heart. And we can use these technologies, but we have to use insight and discipline. We do not just say whatever we feel that day without considering how it might affect others. So I just wanted to share a couple of examples of how Baha'is use social media. So this is a YouTube. So there's so many beautiful uses of social media in YouTube by the Baha'i community, with prayers and songs and just uplifting programs. This is an example of my father using it to talk about the Baha'i faith and principles of it, mostly in Persian, but also some in English. Another example, my mom, every day she quotes different Baha'i quotes about how we can be better, and she posts beautiful pictures associated with it. They're uplifting, and it's something that we can all do. Another example is what my colleague Roxana does is she uses Twitter to promote Baha'i programs, Baha'i-inspired institutions like the Tahrir Justice Center, and how we can support it and what it's doing and how it's helping asylum seekers. Another example is a project that she did where doctors donate medical textbooks to medical students who can't afford them. And building a social community that that promotes wonderful ideals like that. So just wanted to say thank you, and I'm open to questions and discussions now.
So it looks like we got a hand raised. Miss Via, if you want to ask your question.
It's me. Allah Pa.
Allah
I
Akbar.
just want to say it was beautiful subject, and you needed to put this is in the media, TV, newspaper, Facebook, whatever is media is writing of Baha'u'llah. Because few Baha'i here, all of them wonderful, humble, angel Baha'i, I know them. Whole world should to know about that. So many Baha'i in the world, they are not mature. They are new Baha'i. They don't know about this kind of things. They should go to really, somebody must spend money. What is the money for what? Baha'u'llah said, defending my faith. In future, opposition will come. From now, the Baha'i must be ready. This is the medicine of the people. Baha'u'llah said, oh, moving dust. Mordahawi mutaharrik. You know, this is the world we live. And the world is sick. The media is sick. They turn on the TV, everything negative. Whatever is around of you is negative. I go neighborhood here, all my neighbor, nighttime I have meeting with them, all of them against sin, and all of them sad, all of them talking negative about each other. I said, the world is very bad. The Baha'i is the medicine, and this is the medicine. We need to act it now. It's not too late. Because in Iran, Baha'i, they cannot defend themselves because media says so much bad about Baha'i in Iran. We are, and a few people here. This is so beautiful. The writer of Baha'u'llah is so powerful. Anyway, I am very active in the Facebook and the WhatsApp. I love it. And I will ask from John, it's kind of him. If everything you will put the quotation and the writing, put in WhatsApp for me, because I sent to so many people. By the way, I send your mother quotation writing. I share it with my Facebook, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. I share it all the time because I have so many seekers. My husband has 5,000 non-Baha'i. All the time I send to them. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jeremiah, if in Vafa, if you're able to get together, I guess, that list of quotes, we can post it on the comments of this.
Sure. That's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's no real recipe for what you should say or do in social media, but I think the following these principles is the key, and internalizing them and thinking about them before we ever say anything or post anything. And nowadays, what people, it's not just about the written word, right? It's also about what you say and what you're doing, even, because it's all recorded. I have to even be careful on this because I'm being recorded on YouTube. I should not hurt anybody's feelings.
Yes. And we have a question, a hand raised. Alex, please feel free to ask your question.
I don't know, is Zoom considered a social media nowadays?
It could be, yeah, for sure. Especially if it's recorded and available publicly. But it's a type of communication. I think it may not meet the definition of social media per se, because it's more of a video conferencing, but it could be, maybe down the road.
Well, for everyone to know, Zoom has the feature where you stream. So if you use it for streaming, it would be inevitably a form of social media as it's streaming. So it depends on how you're using it.
Right. So this
It has
case
the
is
capability.
live. Here we're live streaming, so it is social media, yes.
And those of you on Facebook and YouTube watching this, I think the connection is a little more clear.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that is a great question. One question that came is about how people, when you're making the excellent points of thinking before we speak, when people have something that's so near and dear to their hearts, and don't get me wrong, sometimes people, when they think about it multiple times, they may still feel inclined to share. However, it not be per se the place to share those feelings that they have. What do you recommend for people that feel so strong that they have to share something when in fact, in almost every circumstance, it's a matter of wisdom, I suppose, but almost every circumstance in environment that is divided over the issue one wishes to speak about, it may be even in that time, just until it maybe is a moot point, but never wise to share that.
Right.
For example, politics. We can give that as an example.
Right. I think, well, first of all, I would avoid anything political, just in general. It's always going to cause division. And it's by definition, because the system of government is partisan. Partisan means divided, literally partisan. It belongs to different parties. And the Baha'i principle on government and politics is that it should not be partisan. People should vote for others based on their principles, not on the parties that they belong to. And they should focus on the character of the individual, not on whether their policies are left-leaning or right-leaning or so on. So in general, I would just avoid it like the plague, basically. If you have a really strong view on something and you're using the principles I mentioned, and you're not sure if it might hurt somebody, how about you ask a friend or a family member? You just say to them, I'm thinking of posting X, Y, or Z. Do you think it could hurt somebody? Do you think it's the right time to say it? Do you think this is the right place to post it? Do you think I should reply to somebody else's post? And remember that most of the time that you want to reply to somebody's post, that post is probably a very divisive post, and people are fighting over it and they're arguing over it. So by default, it's probably not the best time to say it. So when you're really excited about saying something, that's the time you need to pause in general and consider carefully. Yeah. So if you were asking me a blanket question, I would say, no, don't say it. Especially if you're really excited about saying X.
Great points, great points. So here's a question. Why is it that when people want to speak on a certain subject, they, and again, the Baha'i writings for watching this, they do describe the answers to this, but why is it that people have a hard time striking between discussing social issues in a constructive manner and elevating conversations versus regressing into this divisive way of thinking? What do you think that those watching, what do you think they can do to be a part of this solution in elevating conversations in social media, even on divisive subjects, to create a point of unity among their peers, their colleagues, their friends?
Right. Yeah, on the matter of divisive subjects, first, I wouldn't discuss them, especially at the time that they are dividing people, right? So going back to that quote from Baha'u'llah, wait until the discord has finished. People are no longer fighting. Then find the right time and place to discuss things. And you do it in a calm way, and you do it using principles. You don't say, this person is wrong because of X, Y, and Z. You say, let's look at the principles. Sometimes it's best never to address the subject directly, right? Sometimes it's best to address it indirectly, right? Because when you address something directly, it can immediately cause anguish in the people who are feeling a different view. And this applies equally as much, if not more so, in the Baha'i community, because they may all hold different views, and they may be very sensitive to the views of other Baha'is. So in the Baha'i community, you have to also be extremely careful about not promoting discord and fighting over things. Think a lot. I think the whole key about this is to think. Social media is all about talk, you know? But the Baha'i principles are think, then talk.
Thank you. That's very, very useful and helpful, especially in not just the circumstance of the question, but many similar circumstances. So there is a question from Alex Boyson.
Mm-hmm.
And his
I'm just reading it. Yeah, you could read it aloud.
All right. In a local or neighborhood setting where people see each other on almost a daily basis, is it worth using, for example, Facebook or etc.? Do you have an example of a good use of social media on such a neighborhood setting? And he says, thank you. I do want to, before Vafal, you give your response, to mention there's that, I think you called it neighborhood app. The name of that application is
Door, right? Yeah.
Come again?
Next Door.
Nextdoor, yes. Just as an anecdote on Nextdoor, I did not believe it, but my mom in the neighborhood created a group, but something about unity of the global community, something along those lines, and it's of course limited to the area that we are in. But the point of mentioning this is that yes, the group maybe have like 15 to 19 members or what have you, but the group enabled someone who traveled from north of America to Florida, enabled the person to get in touch with the Baha'i community. And actually that person wasn't really in touch with the community, period, for however long the person was here until that social media posting for the neighborhood in a neighborhood-centric social media platform. Right. So I just providing the anecdote, it's surprising, but sometimes it does work.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
John, the name is the earth is but one country, and mankind is citizen. Allah.
Oh, thank you.
So the next door neighborhood is called the earth is but one country, and mankind is citizen, and we have 12 members right now, and we are getting more.
Nice.
Well, thank you for your service. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in regard to whether you should use Facebook or one of these other apps, remember that the world of social media is daily changing. And what is popular today may not be popular tomorrow or next month or next year. And there is no Baha'i principle necessarily about which one you should use, if you should use these 5 or these 10. So I can't comment on whether you should use Facebook or some other app. But the world of social media is about communication and about being together and about being connected. And even if you live in a small setting and you see all the people around you almost on a daily basis, there's always going to be a value in having an internet connection to those people And whether it's Facebook or whether it's something else like an email list, or whether it's a text message group or something else, there's always going to be value in one of those things. I'm connected to my community members, to my wife through Facebook, and I see my wife, 18 hours a day, and still I look at her post and she looks at mine. And there's a value to it. So I wouldn't say that there's not a value because you see people regularly.
Thank you so much for that valuable response. And Alex, hopefully that was sufficient. There is one question on the subject of activity in social issues, socially relevant issues, among which some people have turned to social media for addressing issues like racism, issues like, I suppose, classism and so forth, the disparity in treatment of people of different origins and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
As a Baha'i addressing these issues in social media, as you know, racism, for example, will for a very long time remain divisive in of itself, yet we're, as Baha'is, here to remedy that issue. We believe that we have the solution to that issue. How do you recommend we, when we think, for however long we do think, end up becoming active and taking part productively on these matters?
Right. So first, race is the most challenging issue of our time. And it's going to, as you said, continue to be for ages. And it's a really deep-rooted issue. It's in each of our hearts. It's in each of our communities. It's sometimes very visible, sometimes it's very hidden, and it affects everyone. And but I think the principles of what I talked about today, about avoiding discord, avoiding strife, whether it's racism or anything else, you should think a lot about it. And I would favor not making very vocal statements on social media that cause discord. For example, our community, it has internal discussions about racism. We study the writings on it. We study the messages from the House and the National Spiritual Assembly. We study books together. We're thinking about it. And I know that all over the country and all over the world, these kinds of things are being done by Baha'is. And it's being addressed through these types of discussions. If I were to just go on Twitter and make a very dramatic statement about this being similar to some other atrocity in history or something, that's not helpful to anybody. That will hurt a lot of people. So we have to be very careful, and the real transformation of the world is through individual hearts. I don't think me making a social post about racism is really going to attract anybody's heart. It will just cause a fight. So we have to be careful about how we do things. Yeah. So as time goes by, the institutions will guide us on how we can use social media in relation to topics like this, racism. And there may be very good ways to use social media to promote change. But right now, it's a platform for argument.
Indeed, indeed. So, not to be repetitive, if it sounds so, the takeaway from this presentation is to use social media in a constructive manner, one that is conducive to unity rather than one that is conducive to separation and argument.
Mm-hmm. Right. And focus on using social media to build connections with people, to build community, and to set a good example for how you communicate with others and gain, as they say, followers and gain respect, so that when you do bring up Baha'i things, Baha'i principles, Baha'i ideas, Baha'i news, people listen to you. So, I mean, I think that's what everything is about. Become respectable, become respected, don't hurt anyone, and it will give you opportunities to really benefit the world.
So we do have a hand raised. I see Alex Boyson raised his hand.
Hi.
Hi,
It's
Alex.
me. It's Alex Boyson. Thank you.
Sure.
This is very enlightening and very current, these issues. Thank you so much for broaching them, Dr. Baha'u'llah. My question is regarding our focus, which is on, it should have a local character, as we know, in the Baha'i community, according to our supreme institution, the Universal House of Justice, which is the central body of the Baha'i faith. And we follow their guidance. And last year, they had warned against that our activities shouldn't be diluted, diluted, by our local activities shouldn't be diluted by joining in of international guests and making them international rather than building community on the local level. So this is our goal, basically. And so social media like Facebook they usually have an audience. I mean, like your wife, she might have her audience, and you may read her posts, but I don't know actually, but we want to build community locally, face to face, basically. That's my understanding. And how can we do this in a constructive way? I'm not interested in really what things are like now. What we want to do is find out what do we want to build from as a foundation to build on. What can we build something new that's local? Because now it's very vocal, it's international, and we think of an audience instead of personal relations. Forgive me for being so verbose. Thank you again.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful thoughts. Yeah, and we'll get to Simone in a second. Thank you for raising your hand. Yeah, in regard to local and neighborhood community building, social media plays a very, very small role. So I think that's really not its purpose. It's more for how we use the international, these international community networks, these social media networks. So to build a local community, it's much different. It's about meeting people in person and calling people and visiting them and doing local activities. So it's not, social media is not really applicable that much to it, although you can use social media locally, and it does promote more communication and conversation and planning and so on, but that's not really its purpose. And you're right, we should focus on local community building as a priority, but because we believe in a one world, one humanity, it will always require some aspects of social media to bring that world together. So Simone?
Alapa, thank you so much for giving us such a good input about social media. And I look at it as I do a lot of social media all the time, and I'm in all different sites and so forth for my business and for Baha'i teachings. And what I found out is when you're social media, it looks like you're a parent and you're raising a child. And just like Abdul-Baha mentions, the children are the mirrors of the parents. It's the same thing. In social media, you have to look at it as what you say or what you present yourself to be is a representation of a Baha'i faith. So we need to be more careful in social media in regards to any ideas or anything that comes up. We should keep our ideas and opinions to ourselves, and we should only focus to the Baha'i writings. And even though I sell real estate, but what I do, I don't sell real estate. I first teach the faith, use the Baha'i codes first, and then I bring up to be pertinent to what I'm trying to do to help my human community. And that's what we have to focus on social media. We have to focus on the Baha'i codes first in our any kind of like next door neighborhood, Facebook, or wherever we go. We need to focus on the points of Baha'u'llah and points of how we can better our community through Baha'i codes, and then we can go and do everything else. And we need, as you mentioned, we have to avoid any kind of conflict or anything that we see out there. We just have to not get involved.
Good.
Thank you
Beautiful.
so much.
I couldn't agree more.
But it's all like raising children. And that's what we are. We're living in a society that is defiant, like a teenager is. All the teenagers are defiant. It's because they are trying to learn, have a character. And we, the Baha'is, we cannot use negativism. We have to use positive quotes of Baha'u'llah to help them to grow.
That's a very helpful metaphor / analogy. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
So there is a question, and it's interesting. It's, I think, maybe a segue, but here's the question. So this is from one of the Baha'is in Clearwater asking, how do you regulate, and of course there's different levels of regulation, but how do you regulate the words from Baha'is that are in conflict with the Baha'i text, and due to a lack of education, they think is a Baha'i position?
Can you summarize it again? I missed the point.
Sure. So the question is, how do we become productive protagonists where maybe some people who have understanding of the Baha'i text that is not very correct, but they are sharing it? How do we address this when it is in a social media context?
So the question is really, how do we correct others? Huh?
with
a Baha'i perspective, right?
Yes, and more particularly when they're sharing a Baha'i position that is not the Baha'i position publicly.
Yeah. I think I would avoid it. To be honest, I wouldn't use social media to try to correct somebody. Right.
So on the case of whether, and just to make it clear for all listening so they can understand, when someone were to say, for example, and I want to say something is blatantly wrong, something that the Baha'is have a very firm position on, that there's no question whatsoever. We know that as Baha'is, for example, we are told that it is forbidden to drink alcohol unless the exception applies, which we can read the writings on that. But alcohol is forbidden to Baha'is. And that subject is amply clear. It's been established over the past century. The question that arises, if one were to go on social media and portray just the opposite of the Baha'i teaching, that alcohol is forbidden.
Right. Yeah, this is not really what social media should be used for. to correct somebody's statement that alcohol is allowed, right? This is not the place. This will produce discord and strife. And nothing you say will actually really benefit anyone. It will just hurt people. The Baha'i writings, it's not controversial. It's very clear. It's obvious what the Baha'i writings say about it. So you don't need to go and fight somebody. If it's a matter where somebody is telling a bunch of children that alcohol is allowed in the Baha'i faith, this is something which is probably better referred to an auxiliary board member, right, than to go out there and try and fight it. Because one of the problems with trying to correct people or fight is they usually have a very strongly held view, and you're not really going to convince them. All you're going to do is draw attention to whatever statement they made and make it more and more public and bring more and more people in to the discussion who will fight or support that statement. It's better just to drop it, in my opinion. Drop it, avoid it. You can separately post something about alcohol, but don't refer to this. Don't refer to this argument. Don't expand on it. And it's probably best to wait a couple months, not do it anytime soon. And don't do it in a connected way, like with links and references and this person said this, and that will just cause animosity. So many people in the world drink. It's just part of our society. You're arguing with this person that the Baha'i faith doesn't allow it, isn't really going to help anyone. So I would just leave it alone.
So to follow up, and this is the person's follow-up question.
Uh-huh.
So the follow-up question is, currently there may be youth that are involved in politics in a way that is not in conformity with the Baha'i teachings, where it is completely forbidden. And the question is, how does the member asking this question, or how do we as a community correct that when someone is not just blatantly in politics, but taking part in this contention and maybe even creating contention? What do you suggest a person who's witnessing this does as a Baha'i?
Right. Well, I wouldn't use social media to solve it. That's for sure. This is something which you should really think 100 times before you use social media for any of these difficult types of issues. This is something which the local spiritual assembly should be involved in. This is what their parents should be involved in from the beginning. This is what children's class teachers and junior youth groups, that's what their purpose is, to train our young people in how to behave in public. This is what auxiliary board members deal with. This is not what we announce on social media, that we shouldn't do this or that political activity. It will cause more harm than it solves.
So in an active takeaway, you'd say would be education.
Education, but outside of a social media context. So don't use social media to go and tell off somebody and say, you shouldn't do this. It will just make things worse.
Yes, that is very, very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I understand that the answer hopefully has been sufficient for everyone who has been participating and asking these questions. It's amazing though. So you know that we have a wonderful Baha'i events coming up. We have the Shrine of Abdul Baha. It is the 100th year anniversary of the ascension of Abdul Baha this year. What is your opinion on And based on the Baha'i writings, what is your opinion on sharing these beautiful events with our friends?
Yeah, this is the type of thing you should share. You should use social media to say how excited you are about this, what the meaning of it was, about Abdul Baha's visit to America, so that everyone knows his name. Basically, this is the purpose of it, but not in arguments, not in contention, in informing.
And it also seems that I don't think it's limited to Facebook, but just for the purpose of brevity, on Facebook there are events that you can create, and on social media we can use these events that we create on social media to organize events in person, organize events on Zoom, what have you. So you think that using social media to bring people together to engage in group events that would be effective?
Definitely. Yeah. The purpose of social media is to just increase communication, especially on an individual basis. It allows you to reach people that you wouldn't have been able to reach otherwise. They're far away. They're in their own home in another country, and they're not going out. You are able to reach them and communicate, but we have to just be wise about how we do it. It allows everyone on Earth to be part of your living room discussion.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for all that you've shared with us. I do not see any more questions. I think the issue we've spurned a lot of thought, and hopefully those of us watching today and or later will be using the material from the writings that you've shared and they're deepening on the subject, and perhaps they will do something similar in their own neighborhoods on the subject of social media, its proper use, and trying to find appropriate means, not merely to be relevant, but to be a part of the solution.
Wonderful. I hope so. Yeah, that'd be great. It's a real pleasure to see you all and chat with you, and hope to do it again soon.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure having you. We look forward to having you very soon.
Okay. Take care, everyone.